trying to shape the way I act. Burn it down, burn it down, burn it down, burn it down. I'll set fire to the whole place.
Life is Strange Before the Storm is a 2017 narrative adventure game from Deck 9 and Square Enix. It is the second game in the Life is Strange series, but is a prequel to the original, set 3 years in the past and following the story of Chloe Price and Rachel Amber, how they met and how their relationship began. This game is a well-beloved entry in the series due to Chloe being an extremely popular character. But I'm not the biggest fan of it. And today we're going to kind of explore why. So let's see what this game has in store. In this game, you play as Chloe Price, the deuteragonist of the original game. This takes place right after the death of Chloe's father. She's lost, she's alone, she feels hurt and abandoned by her friend Max, who had moved away at the time. So, through all of this, she ends up meeting Rachel Amber, a rebellious girl at her school of Blackwood Academy, and she gets to know her through train trips, through rock shows, and various other examples of shenanigans that you would expect in the Life is Strange games. The story of this mostly focuses on their relationship. There's some other aspects to it too, such as other characters that you met in the first game and how this game explores them a little more. But it mostly focuses on Chloe and Rachel and how they are there for each other and how they kind of come to rely on each other. Now, for me, this is the weakest story in the series. The story is very bland compared to the other games in the Life is Strange series to me. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, and it touches on a lot of the same things that the other games touch on in terms of characters, their struggles, the things they're going through, a lot of social issues and whatnot. But the way the story is told abandons one of like the entire series, the franchise's main highlights for me, and that is superpowers. There's maybe some hints of something going on in there, but superpowers aren't really a big like part of this game comparatively. And as such, it feels like less in tune with the rest of the series. The only thing that really connects it is the fact that it is, very lore heavy in regards to stuff you learned about in the first game and character stuff that is better explained through the events here. The story itself it doesn't do it for me. And I understand, like, a lot of people really like the story of this game and really like the beats and the drama and everything. It's not as much my thing. I just couldn't get into it. I couldn't get invested as much as I could with every other Life is Strange game. But the story is not the only thing a Life is Strange game has going for it. How are the characters? As mentioned, in this game, you play as Chloe Price, as the main character. She was the deuteragonist of the first game, but this game has her take center stage, being as it's a prequel all about her events. Chloe, as I mentioned in the review for the first game, is a very complicated character. She's troubled, she has a lot of issues, and she's very toxic. And a lot of people really love this about her because it makes her feel more real, makes her feel more in depth and varied as a character. She's not perfect, she has her problems, but she also has a lot of trauma that has caused all of that. And this, again, kind of takes place right after all that trauma. You get, like, a lot of the brunt of her emotions dealing with this kind of situation, and how her relationship with Amber is what kind of starts to save her. Chloe in the first game was a character who I acknowledged is well made. But I want to say here, she's also my least favorite character because of how toxic and terrible she is. I find it hard to like her, and everything because of how just much of a toxic person she has become. I feel bad for her and for what happened, but I can't really like her. You know what I mean? And here in this game, her relationship with Rachel is what saves her, I feel. She's less miserable and less of a, let's be honest, asshole in this game compared to the first. And that's because she has Rachel to balance her out. This is where she's first like starting to gain her edginess, starting to gain her aggressiveness. And you see bits and pieces of that, but she's not really become the Chloe that I didn't like in the first game. So she's a lot more bearable here. And you definitely feel a lot more sorry for her in this game than in the first. Rachel Amber, you didn't really get to know in the first game because her story in the first game is like from the point of view of the present where she's already missing and everything. So you don't really get to know like much of anything about her outside of what Chloe tells you. Here you actually get to see it. And Chloe really didn't do Rachel justice by any means. Rachel is just as much of a complex character as you would expect in a Life is Strange game. Just as much as Chloe, just as much as Max, just as much as the characters that are yet to come in the future games. Rachel Amber is struggling. There's a lot of reasons, there's a lot of motivations for her. She wants to get out. She wants to leave Arcadia Bay. She wants to be her own person away from these things that she feels are holding her back or just, fucking her up. And Chloe wants to help her with that. Rachel is very smart. She's very popular. She's very talented. She's kind of like the ideal student, the ideal friend. But she hides a lot of the pain going on in her life. A lot of the struggles, a lot of the uncertainties. And this is all stuff that she opens up with through her relationship with Chloe. And you even get to see her, go through some of these struggles with her father, for example, who is not a great person. I'll leave it at that so we don't spoil anything, but he's not a great person. You see plenty of characters from the first game in this, such as Chloe's mother, Joyce. You see David Madsen again. You see Frank. A lot of these characters who were in the first game make a return here because you're in mostly the same settings. You're in the same areas with a lot of the same specific locations. And so you're going to see a lot of the same characters. And you definitely see differences in some of them and how they interact with you compared to how they interacted with Max in the first game. And you also see things that could lead to the events of the first game with them. It's really interesting in that regard. You also have a antagonist, I'll say. I won't reveal who they are, but they are intense. I'll leave it at that. They're an intense antagonist, and Rachel kind of discovers that pretty notably firsthand. I'll leave it at that as to not spoil too much. The characters overall are actually the biggest highlight of this game. And Life is Strange has always been great with characters in every single entry they have, even just right at the first game. And this game is no different. They're just absolutely the highlight of the game and the best part of it. But there's a lot more to discuss with Before the Storm. Like all of the Life is Strange games, Before the Storm is a narrative adventure game, meaning you're walking around, interacting with people, interacting with things, finding clues, just kind of searching the environment around you, etc., etc. It's the kind of game where you have to explore and look at your surroundings. And a lot of this comes down to dialogue choices as well. things that you find, things that you discover, dialogue you have with certain characters will open up other dialogue. And this allows you to progress down a couple different paths for the game. So, what's missing here? And I mentioned this with the story, it's the same thing, the lack of superpowers. One of the best gameplay elements of the first game was the ability to rewind time. It allowed you to see the outcomes, the different outcomes your choices could have, and choose one or the other. And sometimes you had to stick with one and you don't know exactly where it led. And that's part of the thing. Some decisions you'll know exactly where they lead, some you won't. Some you'll actually have to make a decision before you find out everything about it. And that was one of the appeals of the first game, one of the things that really drew me in. This game doesn't have that. And like I said, it doesn't have any superpowers, any kind of abilities that you can utilize in order to really sell that with the gameplay. I like the narrative adventure style gameplay. That's great. But not really being able to have that extra oomph to it does cut back on it a little bit. It makes it a little less interesting and more, simple, which isn't always a bad thing. But for Life is Strange, with what I came to expect from the first game, it kind of let me down. It kind of let me down that you don't have that extra oomph of style that felt like was one of the highlights, one of the main points of Life is Strange that made it, strange. So I feel the gameplay is just it's a step down from the first game. While most of it's the same, not having that extra little oomph does take away a little bit from it. But there's a lot more to look at, including the visuals. The visuals of Life is Strange Before the Storm are pretty much on par with the visuals of the first game. There's not really much difference in them. No real upgrades to the visuals, no real change in style. It's pretty much what you would expect. And for a game that came out a year or two later, that's maybe a little disappointing that it's not upgraded at all. It really feels like you're playing almost a DLC to the first game in terms of visuals alone. Because it really feels like it's the exact same graphics, the exact same visual style. It doesn't change to any degree. It doesn't look better in any way. And I feel like because of that, the visuals do lack quite a bit. I didn't say I wouldn't say I wanted this massive upgrade to where it's extremely different in terms of graphical quality and style. But maybe some better lighting, maybe some better shadow work, anything to make it stand apart from the first game. But it didn't really have anything in regards to that. So unfortunately, the visuals didn't really do anything to impress me. Weren't bad by any means, but just didn't impress me. But how is the soundtrack of the game? Life is Strange Before the Storm's soundtrack is not as good as the first game. The first game had such a memorable list of songs, and it just really stood out. With this game, there's maybe one or two songs that are really good, and I can't even really remember what they're called. They don't stand out too much to me. I would never put them on a playlist to listen to just in my day-to-day life like I would with songs from the first game. They're not bad, none of the music is actively bad or distracting, but nothing stands out. Nothing is as impressive as the first game. The only song that I would say that I really liked that much in Before the Storm, I don't know what it's called. I don't know who it's by, but in game it's used during a rock show, like pretty early in the game. And it's like the only song in this game that I think is really that good. Otherwise, I'm just not really impressed. It really didn't do anything special with it. But to be fair, music is subjective by nature. And while I may not like the soundtrack as much, other people may really enjoy it. It's just clearly not for me. So, what do I think overall of Life is Strange Before the Storm? Life is Strange Before the Storm is a good game that doesn't quite capture the same magic as the first Life is Strange. It just doesn't live up to the same hype. It doesn't really get the biggest points that made the first Life is Strange so great. And it centers around a character who, while better in this game than the first, is still like one of the weakest characters in the franchise, in my opinion. It's just a pretty forgettable entry and doesn't really do anything monumentally exciting. It's there, it exists. It's not like bad. It's just kind of okay. It's good, but nothing special. I think that it is the weakest in the franchise, personally, but that means we only have to go up from here. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Leave your thoughts on Life is Strange Before the Storm down in the comments below. And for now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.